I kindly ask you to take your seats as we will be proceeding with Mr. Nandan Nelikani's presentation very shortly. السيدات والسادة الحضور، أرجو اتخاذ مقاعدكم لأننا سنبدأ الجلسة التالية والتي يتحدث فيها السيد ناندان نيلكاني، طبعا المؤسس و رئيس مجلس الإدارة الغير تنفيذي لإنفوسيس، وطبعا هو من أشهر الشخصيات في مجال الرقمنة. And distinguished guests, I would like to announce that His Excellency Dr. Amr Talat, the Minister of Communications and Information Technology, is inviting you to the Summit Gala Dinner along the pyramids at the Marriott Manor House tonight at 7:30 p.m. We look forward to having you all and enjoying the marvelous view of the pyramids while having dinner. So we'll be looking forward to seeing you then. السيدات والسادة الحضور، معالي وزير الاتصالات وتكنولوجيا المعلومات الدكتور عمرو طلعت يدعوكم الليلة وبعد انتهاء أعمال اليوم الأول للمؤتمر لحضور حفل العشاء في ماريوت مانا هاوس في منطقة الأهرامات. سيكون ذلك في الساعة 7:30 مساء بتوقيت القاهرة. طبعا نتمنى أن نراكم جميعا هناك ونستمتع بالأجواء الجميلة حيث الأهرامات، وأيضا ستكون هناك فقرات غنائية وموسيقية مع العشاء. نراكم في ذلك الحين. It's my honor to invite now an icon in the field and the visionary, Mr. Nandan Nelikani, the non-executive chairman and co-founder of Infosys. Not only that, he's the author of the best-selling books, as you can see, Imagining India, Rebooting India, that he co-wrote with Viral Shah. And finally, his latest edition is The Art of Bitfulness, Keeping Calm in the Digital World. They're excellent reads, and I encourage you all to read his books and follow them. But for now, we will be having a presentation by Mr. Nelikani, and after this, he will be answering your questions. We will be showing you a QR code through which you can send your questions. Thank you very much, and I invite Mr. Nandan to the stage.
For many of us, we know Nandan Nelikani very well. There are some here who might not know all of the work and the leadership he's provided for the Global DPI movement. Before requesting Nandan to start his session, I request two people, Amandeep Singh Gill, UN Tech Convoy, to share some brief remarks about India's journey and the work that Ms. Nilekani has done, followed by Liv Martin Nordhaug from the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and then hand it over to Nandan for his address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhukar. Pleasure to be here at the summit and introduce Nandan. Nandan is, I think, into his third career, if I'm counting correctly. He built one of India's biggest IT companies, a global IT company, Infosys. And then he moved to the public sector. He is the architect, the designer, the leader who shaped the India stack, joined the Indian government as a cabinet minister to lead the unique identification authority that put together that massive platform, 1.4 billion digital IDs. That's the foundation of the DPI stack in India. And then his third and current life is that of a leader in philanthropy. So all his learnings, his achievements in the private sector, in the public sector, he's now helping take that to the world. So this is where we interact often. And Nandan, it's a pleasure to be on the Time AI 100 list with you, so I can bask in your glory as well. I would just leave you with one thought about Nandan. His passion for inclusion in the digital transformation. So each time I spend some time with him and with his team, his band of passionate co-workers, followers. So I come away with this big takeaway. How can we get the digital transformation right for each and every citizen? So it's not only about economic value, but it's about social inclusion. It's about protection of human rights, of human agency, and of making sure that we get this right into the future generation sustainably in terms of building the foundation. So the reason why Nandan is on the Time AI 100 list is because he's thinking strategically about digital public infrastructure. DPI is not only about solving our problems from the past, leapfrogging some of our issues from the past. It's not only about the present challenge of turbocharging the digital economy inclusively, but also thinking about the future. What does DPI mean for our data and AI-rich future? So, Nandan, thank you for all your work, and it's great to be here with you.
Thank you.
So this is kind of like the Oscars. But Nandan, as far as I know it, you're not a famous actor, but I will say that you are a hero in the field of digital public infrastructure. Yeah. Much has been written about the incredible journey of financial inclusion and broader public and private sector innovation that DPI has enabled in India. And I will leave it to you to share that story, as one of your nicknames is actually the explainer-in-chief. And I thought I would instead introduce you through three, very brief, I promise, personal stories. In late 2018, I was an advisor, it's called a Sherpa in the UN system, to a Norwegian Minister of Development who was part of the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation, which was co-led by Amandeep here. And as part of this work, we were really seeking to advance how open source could enable acceleration of the Sustainable Development Goals from the Norwegian end, which I was then representing. But the minister I worked with, he met Nandan, and I believe it was in Bali, maybe, at some meeting organized by the World Bank, and he came out, and he was literally bursting with energy, and he said, I met this incredible man named Nandan Nelikani, and they are doing something really, really big on open source. And this was what has led to a digital public good called MOSIP, the Modular Open Source Identity Platform. So that was the first time I heard about Nandan. And then the minister, he gave me Nandan's business card, because of course Nandan had given him the card, and I was the Sherpa, so I was then tasked with following up, right? And I was thinking, well, you know, if I write to this Nandan guy, he will probably never reply, because, you know, most VIPs, they don't reply when you write, when you get their card. And I wrote Nandan, and he responded in 5 minutes. Nandan responded to me. He had never met me. He responded in 5 minutes. And he dedicated a follow-up person called Tanush Bhojwani, who is now in the board of the organization that I lead called the Digital Public Goods Alliance. So that was my first encounter. And to me, it proved that Nandan is an incredible doer. So the second story is, I've had a couple of meetings with Nandan in cars, when Nandan is between meetings, and I've had been squeezed into the schedule if I've been to Bangalore, and I've had the opportunity then to have these really good exchanges in cars. And in the first such meeting, I was trying to get Nandan to come to Norway. And Nandan said, sure, if the roti is high enough, I will come to Norway. And then he went on to explain to me that roti, it's not only the daily bread in India, in the Indian subcontinent, but it also means return on time invested. So this taught me a super important concept, return on time invested, and I use it every day now in my own life. And Nandan did come to Norway, I will say that. He came later with Rohini, who is sitting there. But to me, again, this tells that Nandan is super focused on return on time invested and on driving for impact, but he also makes other people, their time, their return on time invested very high. And I say that to all of you here and all of the countries that are here, that having the chance to engage with Nandan, that is high, high roti. And then my last, so in another car, a second car meeting, we were talking about that there was, a lot of global attention now and momentum around digital public infrastructure. And we discussed that there was a lot of noise and interest, but how to kind of make this effort more focused, more tangible. And Nandan said, what about 50 countries, 5 years, some use cases? This became 50 in 5. And for some reason, I ended up, and the Digital Public Goods Alliance, and I also have people in my team here, we ended up co-coordinating this campaign. And Nandan is not paying me to do it. I'm just doing it. And what is the point of this? It is, I don't like get manipulated easily. So I did this because I was inspired by Nandan, right? And I do think that in addition to being the explainer-in-chief, Nandan is also an orchestrator-in-chief. He makes other people also extend his incredible work and vision because he inspires. So I wanted to just leave you with that and handing over to Nandan, and just to say that you are a true inspiration to us on this incredibly important agenda. And I deeply admire your persistent efforts to improve the lives of billions of people. The stage is yours, Nandan.
Thank you, Amandeep. Thank you, Liv. I really felt like the Oscars. But I think I'm really absolutely delighted and privileged to be here. I think this gathering of the Global DPI Summit, 500 people from 100 countries, is a really landmark event. And this builds on the landmark events that Amandeep and all did a couple of weeks back in New York, where they launched the Global Digital Compact, the safeguards for digital public infrastructure, and the rules for AI, which I thought were very significant. And I'm particularly delighted that this event is in Egypt, which has been a leader in digital transformation. We heard from His Excellency, Minister Talat, and I think it's really good that we have so many people here from different countries doing all the very important things in DPI. Now, we know that technology is becoming more and more part of our lives. The digital intensity of our lives is going up with all the devices we have, all the applications we use, all the time we spend on these devices and so on. And we also know that these technologies have potential for causing harm. We have seen the impact of polarization, where people retreat into their filter bubbles. We have seen what happens to mental health by excessive use of devices, and a host of other things which have brought technology to the forefront. But equally, I believe that technology can be a force for good, that the power of digital transformation done wisely, done properly, done thoughtfully, done with the appropriate safeguards, is also a huge force multiplier and accelerator for the societal transformation that we seek around the world. My own journey in this began, as Amandeep and Liv referred. I was very much a private sector person with a corner office overlooking a golf course. And then I got drafted into the project of giving every Indian a unique ID. And so I took up this job in the Indian government. I worked for 5 years. Many of the warriors of that journey are in this room in different capacities. So we all worked together, and we built the world's largest digital ID program, gave everyone an ID. At peak, we were doing 1.5 million enrollments a day with 35,000 enrollment stations across the length and breadth of the country. So it was really a huge scale issue. But equally, it was about managing, orchestrating, getting all the governments, the political parties, the state governments, the bureaucracy, the judicial system, getting everybody aligned to put their weight behind this goal. And we learned a lot of things on how to build at population scale, how to build frugally, how to build very high transaction volumes, and most importantly, how to build things with inclusion in mind. How do we design technology so no one is left out, that everybody can participate? And these are all very important lessons for us. We had looked at earlier large projects. We had looked at the internet, which has transformed all of us. We looked at GPS, which has transformed the way we do maps or ride hailing. These were also government-led projects, but over time, thanks to the fact that they were opened up, we have seen huge market innovation on them. But in the case of internet and GPS, market innovation was not intentional. It was a byproduct of the fact that this infrastructure existed. When we designed Aadhaar, the ID plan, we did it with the intentionality that it would be a platform on which both public and private innovation would flourish. And we have seen public innovation on Aadhaar with the direct benefit transfer. India runs the world's largest direct benefit transfer, about over 200 million transactions a day. It led to financial inclusion, it led to mobile inclusion, and so on. And there's continuous innovation happening in the public sector. For example, face authentication is now truly taken off in Aadhaar. So that's the public sector side of it. But at the same time, the fact it was built with APIs and open protocols and standards allowed all kinds of institutions, banks, capital market players, insurance companies to use Aadhaar KYC and authentication to build new business models. So our philosophy, therefore, and why we think DPI is not the same as just government applications. It's not the just same as connectivity, but it's a way of thinking of population scale digital infrastructure which allows you to combine public rails with private innovation. In other words, it's a whole of society approach to technology to enable these digital transformation. Now, it began with Aadhaar, and later on, in the last 15 years, in India, we have built many other platforms. UPI, the payment platform built by NPCI, is the world's largest digital payments platform that does 14.4 billion transactions a month, 500 million users, 50 million merchants who make payments, or the open banking standards called Account Aggregator. And many more are coming, and I think my friend Pramod will talk about some of those things tomorrow. But this has been a journey of building population scale transformational initiatives. And in many ways, the transformation that you see in India can be attributed to the fact that this digital infrastructure is in place. And it's important to understand that apart from thinking about it, we think about this as interoperable platforms. In other words, it's not about doing silos, vertical silos, and taking out applications and building new ones all the time. It's about building horizontal layers of capability which all interact with each other. And over time, as you build more and more of these layers, then you have the combinatorial innovation to make a big difference to both society and to markets. So really, so DPI is more than a technology. It's a way of thinking about modern technology in a way that societies can harness the potential, societies can harness innovation, societies can harness the power of markets, but at the same time, in a way that it's pro-user, pro-market, pro-competition, pro-innovation. So there's a lot of philosophical thinking behind the way we think of DPI beyond technology. And therefore, that's really what we care about in the DPI journey. And it's really great to see that many countries around the world have implemented their own version of DPI over the last 20 years. Of course, here in Egypt, there are many examples of that. We heard from the lady from Estonia. So clearly, it's a global movement which we have brought together here today. Now, what is it that we can think about taking it globally? And the global push of DPI was really happened during India's presidency of the G20, when DPI became a topic at the G20 level. And today we are seeing many, many more countries coming together. And Liv talked about this initiative called 50 in 5, which is how do we take DPI thinking and products to the world, 50 countries in 5 years. Now, the DPI themselves are often built on digital public goods. And therefore, there's a whole, again, movement to bring together digital public goods from around the world and make them available in a packaged way for countries to take it and go on. Now, what are we trying to achieve here? One, we want to create a mindset and approach of how digital transformation should be done around the world. Done in a way that you use open infrastructure, open protocols, open technologies, open source, so that you're not locked into any particular one approach. Done in a way that things are all interoperable, things are done at population scale, things are done with inclusion in mind. So being universal is a fundamental tenet of DPI, that everybody should be in the game. And that's something we care about. And what we find is that today, when we think about the world's challenges, they're all very different. You know, we're dealing with the challenge of climate change, along which we have the challenge of energy transition, something which is going to take trillions of dollars to do. We're dealing with the challenges of debt, as countries struggle with debt, and they have to improve the strength of their finances. We are dealing with the challenge of formalization. How do we get more people to participate in the economy? These are all different kinds of challenges, and we think of all the challenges that are encapsulated in the Sustainable Development Goals. But to think of these challenges as vertical in their silo challenges does not leverage the power of digital technology. And therefore, DPI thinking is a pervasive way of putting in place digital infrastructure at population scale in a very inclusive manner, which then allows us to solve the challenges, be it the challenge of climate, of giving credit to everyone, or about enabling people to participate. And formalization is a very important part of the DPI journey, because the kind of DPIs we're talking about here, identity, payments, data exchange, essentially enable people to create a ladder of aspirations. So somebody can get an ID, they can use that to get a bank account, they can get that a mobile connection, they can take a loan from a friend, they can start a small business. That small business has digital footprints because of payments being digital, and then they can parlay those digital footprints into getting access to credit. So there's actually a very thoughtful journey here of allowing everyone to participate. And because it is being done through this approach, we can get it to the whole population of the world. And so when we think about all the challenges that we have, it's entirely possible that it's not really possible to do that without thinking through strategically how you think about digital transformation at scale using a DPI approach. So I do believe that this is a landmark event. We have people from 100 countries, 500 people, practitioners, we have governments, we have NGOs, we have bilaterals, we have multilaterals, we have private sector actors. We're all here together because we all believe in this mission of DPI. We all believe that if some of the world's most intractable problems have to be solved, they need a DPI approach. Because we all believe that this is a great case of global cooperation, where we combine the lessons we have learned from the world without sacrificing our individual sovereignty, and therefore we're able to get the best of both worlds. So I do hope that in the coming 3 days, we achieve some amazing progress and really take DPI to the world and all become agents of change for 8 billion people. Thank you very much.
Questions time. Yeah, sure. So, thank you very much, Mr. Nandan, for your presentation. And as mentioned before your presentation, we are ready to receive your questions. Just scan this QR code, and we'll be collecting the questions and forwarding them to Mr. Nandan. But meanwhile, we had a couple of questions through email, so let me post them to you. The first one is on the key success factors in India's DPI journey that are least understood or talked about.
I think one, of course, was commitment, political commitment, government commitment across administrations over 15 years. So I think that was very important. The other was the approach taken, not to solve individual siloed solutions, but to build horizontal capability that everybody could use, and also to think of it as layers and layers of capability which could roll out over time to ultimately get a very powerful stack. So I think these are some of the thinking long-term and having a strategic view of digital transformation.
And then let me put this in the middle so we can share it together. Some people are asking about the policy or legal frameworks that countries should put in place before they start their DPI journey.
I think we have a lot more on that front. I mean, as I mentioned, the UN has come out with 3 important frameworks. First is the Global Digital Pact. The second is the AI framework, and the third is the safeguard framework for DPIs. The G20 came out with a complete report on how to think of DPI, which is also public. So I think many countries now have comprehensive privacy laws for technology. So I think we have really evolved a very sophisticated set of guardrails, guidelines, what can we do right, what is it we have to prevent from doing wrong. So I think all of that is available, and I think you'll learn more about that in these 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Perfect, and we have the questions pouring. I don't know if, yes, we'll start with this. In your view, what are the 5-year tangible priorities for global DPI?
Well, I think as Liv mentioned, we have this ambitious initiative to take DPI to 50 countries in 5 years. We believe that every country can benefit from a DPI approach. They can choose to implement at their pace. They can choose to implement those things that are more valuable to them. They can choose to implement them with complete control and sovereignty of the technology. And that's what really we hope to happen. That is the adoption and use of DPI around the world, but to solve specific issues, to drive social inclusion, to drive economic growth, to drive a society which is able to take its people and formalize them. So the very specific goals we believe that we can achieve with a DPI approach.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting one. What's the role of private sector tech companies in DPIs?
Well, private sector has a very big role in terms of using DPI to build innovation. As I mentioned, DPI thinking is about having public rails and private innovation. So you have public rails like ID and payments, but on top of that, private companies can build. So that's one very big role for the private sector. The private sector can also play a role in the building of DPIs. If you go back to the example I gave you about 35,000 enrollment stations that we had in Aadhaar, all those enrollment stations belong to private sector companies. So, but the most important thing in DPI is you can't outsource thinking. Thinking cannot be outsourced to vendors. Thinking has to be done by the state, the nation. It has to be strategic. It has to be vendor agnostic. It should make sure that you have optionality. It should, so a lot of thinking is involved. So thinking cannot be outsourced, but many of the tasks can be outsourced.
Would you like to choose a question that you would
Sure.
from here? So which one would you address? Because there are many.
Yeah, well, I've addressed three of them. So I think given the urgency of economic growth, how can we fast track using packaged DPIs? So I think there is a very strong connection between DPIs and economic growth. Because economic growth requires every resident and citizen of a country to participate in the economy. To participate in the economy, they need the basic tools. They need digital IDs, they need bank accounts, they need mobile connections, they need a digital payment system, they need a way to use their data to get access to credit and so on. So actually, DPIs done properly have a direct impact on economic growth, and it is an inclusive economic growth. It's not just about a few guys, making money from some resources, but it's by making sure that every human being, every resident, every person in your country is able to participate more effectively and improve their lives using technology.
Now, I like this one. Many fear DPI is a tool for surveillance. What are your thoughts on this?
I think DPI is certainly not a tool for surveillance, and I think if you look at the safeguards, which have been just published 2 weeks back by the UN, they have very clear rules and guardrails on how DPI should be built. So I think we have to see the positive transformation, liberating aspects of DPI, and we have to put in the guardrails, which have been well defined, to make sure that it is not used for any other purpose. And in fact, if you look at the design of Aadhaar, for example, it does not collect any data. It only gives authentication and KYC services. So it's by design, not for collection of data. So I think you have to think through which is why I'm saying you cannot outsource the thinking of DPI. You have to do DPI thinking and then maybe use partners to get it done.
There's an interesting question from someone here. I guess it's an anonymous question. They say not all countries have a Nandan. So what would those countries do without having a champion in the field like yourself?
Well, I think, in this 15-year journey, I think DPI has gone from an unknown to a known, in the sense we know what it is. We know the value it delivers. We know what are the components to make it happen. We know the safeguards we need to have. We have many of the great open source implementations of this. Many of them are in this room. So I think it's a whole lot easier to do DPI today. Certainly, it requires internal champions in countries. These champions have to have access to the highest political leadership. It has to be seen as a whole-of-country approach. So the state, the market, civil society all come together. So there's a lot of other requirements, but definitely it is replicable, and we are very confident that it will replicate 50 countries in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. A question from Steve Haley. How can we take the way we share among engineers and open source DPGs and expand that to policymakers as well?
Increasingly, we are finding that we can build some extraordinary DPGs by creating a global community of developers. We find so many people, young people who want to contribute to making a difference, but they're looking for someone to create a framework, create the orchestration to make it happen. So I think we can get very good talent today to work on DPIs and DPGs.
Okay, and from Taylor Downs, DPI building blocks should be reusable modules, not whole solutions. Governments should pay SIs for solutions, not modules. Who pays for the modules?
Well, actually, the way DPI is evolving, it is a set of different interoperable modules. Many of them are available today as open source from many countries. We have open source DPI components from Estonia, from Norway, from Africa, from India, and so on. So and these have been built either as an offshoot of something built for a government project, or they're built by philanthropy. For example, MOSIP, which is being rolled out in 17 countries, and Peter of the World Bank referred to it, is entirely funded by philanthropy. It's an open source IDE platform, and there are many other examples of that. So I think the good thing is that we have found that if we have a global ambition and vision, we're able to get people together and harness their talent, enthusiasm, and commitment to make things happen.
We have a question from Yogesh Gov Insider. The definition of DPI gets broader and encompasses more and more horizontal layers. Are there concerns around mission creep and dilution of the core ideas?
I think the core ideas of DPI are very clear. They are about enabling public rails that allow private innovation. They are about creating technology that has safeguards built into it of privacy and security. They're about creating interoperable modules which plug into each other and combine to create innovation. They're about doing things at population scale at very low cost in a way that everyone can participate. It's about being user-centric. It's about being universal. It's about being unified. So it's really more than thinking about it as just as technology. We have to think of it as a set of guiding principles on how nations around the world should approach digital transformation to directly benefit their citizens and drive social and economic growth.
Another anonymous question: how can DPGs that power DPIs sustain in the long run?
Well, I think we have many DPGs. Many of them are funded by philanthropy. But over time, as the implementation of these DPGs become more prevalent, they could perhaps charge something for the DPGs. So I think we will see very effective business models emerging for the sustainability of DPGs. And then I think as we roll this out globally, we're going to get more and more interest from technology companies, cloud operators, from SIs, from consulting firms, all of whom will create a practice around enabling DPI, DPG approach.
Do you expect the major payment providers to fight the rise of DPI?
Well, our own experience about DPI's approach and DPG is it expands the market. It allows everyone to participate. So I think the benefits of expanding the market and making it more inclusive not only help societies to progress, it also creates market opportunities for everybody, including incumbent companies.
And then the role of AI, how can we leverage AI for DPI?
Well, we think that AI and DPI are very closely connected, that to build AI at population scale, to harness the data of a country, to really create inclusive solutions where 1 billion people or 8 billion people can use, you need to take DPI to the power of AI. We need to use a DPI approach to AI, whether we create them as public goods or whether we enable, take existing DPIs and amplify them with AI. So we see DPI and AI as very synergistic, and we would actually say that to get the full power of AI, you need to have a DPI foundation.
In your view, what are the 5-year tangible priorities for global DPI?
I said it, 50 countries in 5 years.
Yes, you did. So we have another question on African economies and how can DPI help in the integration of African economies?
Well, I do believe that a DPI approach could play a huge role in the free trade area of Africa and bring all the 55-odd countries together by having standard portable ways of doing things across countries, which will increase the mobility of people, the mobility of money, the mobility of products, allow people to figure out how to harness the raw materials and have the manufacturing and so on. So I think a DPI approach, and I think the head of the African Free Trade area is coming tomorrow. I'm sure we'll hear more about it from him.
There's another question. What are some common myths you have come across among those who are starting their DPI journey?
Well, one is, do we really need all this stuff? And why can't just allow the markets to do it? Or it's so complicated, or it's so politically difficult to navigate. These are some of the things. But all these are very, doable. I mean, it's been done. It's been done in many countries today. I mean, just ID, for example, is being rolled out in 17 countries, as the World Bank mentioned. So I think it's really a mindset. It's important to think of digital transformation as something at the head table. So just like as you think about how do you deal with energy transition, how do you deal with climate change, how do you deal with polarization, how do we deal with economic growth, how do you deal with poverty reduction, we have to think of how do we deal with digital transformation. And for that, we have come to the conclusion 15 years later that you have to think it through, and that's why DPI is so important.
There's also a question on the role of local capability building and how it can play in sustainable DPI adoption.
I think to roll out DPI at global scale, it has to be by building local capability and capacity. And many of the things that is being done by the ecosystem of actors in DPI, co-develops, CDPI, COS, and many others, it's an alphabet soup of organizations, DIAL, and so on. All of them are focused on ensuring that there is domestic capability that is built up. And we are very clear that DPI is not something where you have to depend on somebody. You may use somebody else's experience and products and code to get a big leap forward. But this real value is when you become independent, totally sovereign, and learn how to use it on your own.
And how do we move beyond the rhetoric? DPI at the moment feels heavy with jargon and lacks clarity overall. What does it mean for strategy and implementation?
Well, I think all of us here have a bias for action, so it's not really limited just to talking. It's actually about doing. And in the next 3 days, you'll hear many, many examples of how countries around the world, companies, countries, institutions, multilaterals are all contributing. So I would say that the DPI station has left the train. It's gathering speed, and I see it having remarkable impact in the coming 3 to 5 years.
Is it feasible to build a cross-border DPI, for instance, regional scale, which might be useful for refugee management as a use case?
Yes, I think increasingly we are going to see more cross-border solutions, and tomorrow Pramod will talk about the Finternet, which is one example of that. So yes, we have to think of interoperable cross-border solutions to really get benefits for migrants, for cross-border payments, for cross-border asset tokenization. There are many, many use cases for more efficient cross-border activity, and I think Pramod will talk about it.
And another question on the role of policy and maybe the legal framework in building a successful DPI.
Well, policy is very important. Our own experience has been that the policy development goes hand in hand with the technology. So, in the 15 years I worked on DPI, I worked with 4 different central bank governors and a multitude of secretaries in the government. And policy-enabled DPI is very fundamental and core to doing it properly. And now I think we know what's to be done. And we know what kind of policy we need to create competition, innovation. We know what kind of policy we need to have safeguards. These are all known things. And I think collectively we can harness what we know and apply it around the world.
I saw a minute ago a question from Raja on any failures that you faced along the way and that they led to aha moments. What are those?
Well, it depends on how much time you have. But yes, of course, we have had many failures. Many times we have missed out. But I think if you have a strategic vision of where you want to go, even though you may have tactical adversity, I think we can ultimately get to the goal, even if we take 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Strategic clarity and commitment is very important.
Okay, I need to follow up the questions before they disappear. Does DPI need to be built using open? We've covered this one. Is it feasible to build cross-border DPI? And we've covered this one as well. Would you foresee in the contribution of DPI to food systems transition?
Well, I think there are many aspects to DPI in food. Obviously, it's part of building a public distribution system and enabling interoperable delivery of food, emergency food, and so on. It's about providing a food welfare network. It's about enabling farmers to participate in the economy by giving access to materials, credit, and markets. So the whole host of things you can do in the food system. But I think that's another area where a lot can be done going forward.
How do we address the political economy question in rolling out DPIs?
Well, I think anyone running a government knows that there are multiple priorities, multiple demands on that time, multiple attentions that people seek. And that's rightly the way it is, because that's the way it operates, because societies move on events. But at the same time, we need to have part of our mind share for these longer-term transformations, which we have to persevere with, because they are the ones that is ultimately going to achieve the change we want. We will not be able to get there by a series of tactical steps. We have to have a strategic vision and dovetail the tactical steps into the larger strategic vision, which is what we're trying to lay out.
Okay, and there's one from Mr. Kumar. How can these 100 countries attending collaborate more on DPI?
Well, I think over the next 3 days, you're going to meet many people from different countries, from the World Bank and from many other bilateral and multilateral institutions, from philanthropic institutions like EMGF and so on. So I think it's about building that conversation and leveraging co-develop and others to create a global unification of the conversations around this.
Okay, would it be possible to onboard DPI without a data regulatory framework in place? If no, shouldn't a global legal framework around data emerge?
Well, it will take some time for a global legal framework on data to emerge. So I think we have the guidelines already put out by the UN. I think they're excellent, and we can use that as the guardrails. And countries can start working on DPI even as they draft the laws. Again, we have many good examples of data privacy laws which we can use.
That was a question. Okay, we are beyond that. How to harness NGO regional organizations with the global and state endeavors to bring DPI projects to light and create the value. This is from Mr. Ayman Ghoni.
Well, DPI implementations ultimately will be at the regional, continent, or country level. And therefore, the appropriate civil society organizations have to be harnessed to make it locally possible. So that's part of building the ecosystem of actors from markets, from NGOs, from government to implement DPI at different levels.
A question from Adham. You said think is done by states. What are the enablers to reach a sustainable think result?
Well, I think we can all learn from each other what others have done on creating sustainable DPI thinking. It's not complicated, it just has to be done. But it just requires more and more people to participate in that activity and recognize that having a strategic framework is critical to getting where you want while you do tactical things as you go along.
An anonymous question, given only 57% of the global population are using mobile internet, is the focus on DPI a distraction versus providing usable connectivity in LMICs?
Not at all. I think obviously providing connectivity is a prerequisite for any of these things, and we have to focus in a very determined fashion to make sure connectivity is ubiquitous in every country. But connectivity alone is not going to solve it. You need a layer on top of that, which is the DPI layer, and therefore you have to work on both at the same time.
Okay. Let me see. How can a small country without the scale of India implement DPI given upfront investment?
One of the DPI principles is to lower the cost of deployment and to lower the cost of usage. So everything in DPI is actually built to be very frugal in its nature. And we are already co-develop and DPGA are talking to many small countries who are in fact eager and will possibly even implement faster than some of the larger countries.
As we are talking about the global DPI, how do you see the role of the UN in the global DPI journey? And this is a question from Ms. Sausan Fahmi.
Well, I think the UN has a very huge role to play, and Amandeep is here, the Global Tech Envoy of the UN. They have done some amazing work in safeguards, in Global Digital Compact, in the AI rules. And they have enormous convening ability to bring countries together. So I think the UN will be a very important actor, along with other institutions like the World Bank, IMF, ADB, African Development Bank, and so on.
So we will have to roll it over with this. Thank you very much, Mr. Nandan, for being with us and answering all those questions. Thank you very much. And now we'll be taking a lunch break, so we will resume after a little while. I hope you enjoy your lunch and see you soon. Thank you. And I've been informed that you should check your website because there has been some amendments on the agenda. So check the agenda again to follow up on the sessions you would like to attend and make sure you're here on time. Thank you once again. Thank you.